Hey, everybody. Welcome to Leading Thriving Cities. This is our show where we shine a spotlight on leadership in public service, and we have deep conversations about sustainability and how we build a thriving future for our cities. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners. Our guest today is Melissa Grubbs. She's commander at Round Rock Police Department. And I got to tell you, this may be one of the most important interviews we've ever done. We really dive deep into what it means to be a woman as you are navigating leadership in both law enforcement and just in the world, and how the challenges that are faced cause them to show up in a way that is truly heroic, the good that can be done with that. And we really get into imposter syndrome and how do we navigate that? How do we learn to step into spaces when we're a little bit uncertain? How do we learn to actually see the truth about ourselves and not just what our fear is telling us? Melissa has so much wisdom to share. You're going to have so much fun with this, and you're going to walk away with a lot of notes. I'm so glad you're joining us today on Leading Thriving Cities. All right, Melissa, thank you so much for being here. We've already talked for like 30 minutes about everything under the sun, but we're excited to finally get started before John has a stroke over here. Thank you so much for being here. I love having people from law enforcement to kind of come in and help us understand an industry we don't really understand well. I think we see a lot of outside things on TV and we hear stories, but we don't know a lot of people really in it. So I think there's some value in y'all being able to tell this story. And so you're a commander with Round Rock Police Department, where you've spent almost all of your career.
Yes.
Almost all your paid career. You let us know you did a lot of volunteer police work ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a few years now. What's something you really wish people understood about your role or about policing in general?
What I wish they knew
Mm-hmm.
is that it's not an easy job at this level.
Yeah.
It is 24/7, and it's not the work itself. You know, the work itself is not strenuous.
Yeah.
But the weight of the responsibility for the people that you are charged with to take care of, that never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of the night when the phone goes off, those are my kids.
Yeah.
That's my family.
Yeah.
And that weight over time, over the course of 20 plus years, it's heavy.
It makes a difference, doesn't it? Whenever we're doing these presentations to show people how much leadership health matters, we always show an org chart. You got your front line, you got your middle management, executive team, and ultimately somebody at the top. And then we just flip it upside down. And most people have never looked at an org chart upside down, but you see this unstable weight on the people at the top that nobody understands, that if they're not steady, if they're not healthy, the whole thing starts to shift in a scary way. And it's kind of a visual illustration of what you're talking about. Like, there is that real weight to it, isn't there?
Yes.
So over 20 years now, how have you gotten better at managing that? Because ultimately, I think anything that's unsustainable, there's a breaking point. And I see a lot of people in law enforcement, they hit a breaking point with this because they don't manage it particularly well.
Yep.
I'm curious, what have you learned about managing that?
Well, unfortunately, I hit that breaking point. I got to the point because of some job-related issues that I was at the end.
Yeah.
I was the one who needed help.
Yeah.
Fortunately, at that time, we had mechanisms in place that I had somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And also, fortunately, by that time in our industry, we were more accepting of someone who needed help.
Yeah.
I didn't share it with anybody, but if I had, I think it would have been better received than it would have been 10 years prior.
I think you're 100% right about that.
I had, I guess, either the fortunate or unfortunate experience of being involved in 2 attempted officer suicides.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
And the very first words out of their mouth were, "I'm going to lose my job. This is going to end my career."
Yep.
Both of them went on to have long careers, still working, promoting. They have families. They're healthy and happy.
Yeah.
25-ish years ago when I started this, I might not have been able to say that.
Yeah.
But now this generation is so much better about asking for that help.
Yeah.
And we have to model that from the top down because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I know what it feels like when you just can't. You can't.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I need some help. And not knowing what that looks like and having somebody step in and say, okay, we're going to walk this out.
You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I care about you. I'm here and we're going to get through it.
Yeah. So you hit that breaking point. You raised your hand and said, I need help. And you got help. And you said, I didn't really tell people about it at the time necessarily. If you hit the breaking point again today, would you model that a little more openly for people?
I think I would.
Yeah.
Not as much because of the position that I'm in, because I think that's very important that people understand that just because you promote, you don't not suffer the human side of the job.
Yes.
You know, you still drive all over town and say, I worked a fatality there, I worked a suicide there, I saw this here, that there. That cumulative effect still comes with you.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not riding around in a patrol car every day doesn't mean that it's not still in the passenger seat some days.
Yeah.
But I think it is important now, and I talk to our cadets about this. Don't be afraid to say, hey, this bothers me. This is not okay.
Yeah.
I need to talk to somebody, and I don't know what it looks like to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to do that. They are so much more open and in touch with feelings because they're allowed to have feelings now.
Yes.
When I started,
it wasn't a thing, was it?
It was like the military. If we want you to have feelings, we'll hand them out to you and you can put them in your locker.
Yeah.
But
that's the thing that excites me most about working in law enforcement. We're dedicated our next 4 decades of ultimately, can we help with creating these more healthy environments where we can talk about these things? Because y'all's industry is one that's built on the foundation of just suck it up. And we don't do that. We're not designed as humans to just suck it up. And so we've built an entire industry of some of the most important people in our society. And we've said, just suck it up. And it's on this shaky foundation. I think y'all are learning that. Y'all are getting better about that. Not every department is better about that yet. And even the ones that are good at it, there's still progress that needs to be made, right? Because it's still to this day, I will sit in rooms and I will hear, but if I admit that, am I going to lose my job? Like if I go seek peer support or EAP, is that going to be held against me? And so it's going to take a lot of years of them going and finding out that they're okay, that we're not coming after them for that, for them to start to build new muscle memory and trust. Yeah. And that's going to be an interesting journey, but it's, you said it right. It's in the modeling of it, right? It's in the, I'm willing to say I'm struggling too. And that is so helpful for people because there's the weight of there are now officers alive because you were in the room, because you said, I'm going to step into this space and I'm going to help. But then you take on some of that weight yourself. And we have to know what to do with that. And our generations were not taught how to do that well. That was not something modeled for us by our parents. And so now we're learning. And I think it's funny, it's the younger generation kind of forcing us to learn how to do this. Because otherwise, if we don't change, we look up in 20 years and we cannot get young people to even consider being police officers.
No, there's nothing there for them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So on this journey, the second question we always ask is about this idea of what's the biggest thing you had to overcome internally as you've navigated this? And I'm really curious your perspective because you're the first female law enforcement officer we've had on the show. And every woman I've worked with in law enforcement, I've loved the conversations because it is a different perspective. And so I'm curious, what are some of the things you've had to wrestle with and overcome as you've navigated from putting yourself through police academy all the way through commander in a very, very busy police department?
My biggest obstacle has been myself. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. Yeah. But it took me a very long time to realize and accept it's not reality. Yeah. Every promotion, every lateral transfer, every time I had another job opportunity, it was, I can't. I don't have the skill set. Yeah. I'm not prepared. It's not the right time. I'm not good at this.
Who am I?
Who am I? What do I have to offer?
Yeah.
Even coming here today.
I wasn't going to ask, but I was curious about that.
Oh, absolutely. Like, what would I possibly have to say that people would want to hear?
Yeah.
But I'm 57 years old. I've done a lot of living.
Yes.
And there are things that I have been fortunate enough to be able to share.
Mm-hmm.
God has given me a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a responsibility to share that, even if it's just for one person that it makes a difference in their life.
Yeah.
I have that responsibility. So wrestling and struggling with I'm not like everybody here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look like everybody here. I don't think like everybody here.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a place.
Yes.
And learning that each one of these steps, my husband will say, every time you promote, we have the same conversation. Why do you doubt yourself? Why can't you see yourself like I see you and like God sees you? I'm like, because I see the mirror over here.
This is the interesting part, is something you already pointed out. Like, the mirror is essentially lying to us. Mm-hmm. We believe a false story about ourselves. And every time you feel I'm not enough, that is a lie meant to keep you small and contained. Because if you never try something new, you're not in danger. And it's a lie because then you go try it and you see what happens. But it's interesting too, your fear of even coming and doing this. Of who am I to share this and do this? When we interviewed Chief Banks, I said, who else would you recommend be featured? You were at the top of the list. And so clearly he and you don't see it the same way, right? He looks in that same mirror and sees something entirely different. And so I think that's true of all of us. I get the same thing. I was just telling John about an opportunity we have this weekend that I'm feeling a little bit of that. I don't ever feel that. And yet because of the specifics of the situation, I'm feeling it. And so we had to kind of navigate that and figure out, how do we walk in there knowing we're enough? Knowing that we are meant to be in that room and that it is not an accident. And for me, that's very helpful to understand that for this time and for this place, you are here.
Yes.
And it is not an accident. You're meant to have an impact. I'm curious, as you have kind of really navigated this, and you said you were one of the main problems, and imposter syndrome is a piece of that. How do you reset when it does pop up still? Because I don't think any of these things that we're overcoming internally are a switch we flip and we're just done.
Oh, I wish it was.
Oh my God, it'd be so much easier, wouldn't it? But it becomes a practice. And so what does that practice look like for you when what do you recenter on to understand, no, I'm going to go in here with some boldness and courage, and I'm going to be who I'm meant to be?
First of all, I remind myself of who God says I am.
Yeah.
And how he sees me.
Yeah.
And then I look back on my successes or the things that I have overcome.
Yeah.
I had a supervisor very early in my career that said, you know what? There's really not a place for women in law enforcement.
Interesting.
They may have something to do with like kids or sexual assault victims, but they really don't belong on patrol.
Wow. This was also back when HR departments didn't exist, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
Assembly of God minister's kid.
Yeah.
I was actually in the police academy for about 3 months before I ever told my parents. Okay. I was 30 years old and was still afraid to tell my parents that I was going to be a police officer. Yeah. And he said, you know what? You need a job where you can sit behind a desk and look pretty and be safe. You don't need to be a police officer. So those kind of little niggling things that come in and try to steal from you.
Yeah.
But going back and saying, okay, I took this promotion. Mm-hmm. These are the good things that came out of that.
Yeah.
I didn't fall on my face. I didn't mess it up like I thought I was going to. I've been able to accomplish this, and it's a conscious decision to build on the good and shut the other voices down.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I shared with you that I had listened to some of your other podcasts and listening to Karen Daly talk about it's not just in law enforcement.
Yes.
It is in public service as a whole that women have this feeling. We're all united in the feeling, but nobody ever has talked about it really in the past until very recently.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? I know exactly what you're talking about because I experienced the same thing.
Yes.
When I am trying to promote in an organization that somebody has built a box and I don't fit in that box.
Yeah.
Do you change who you are to fit in the box or do you get rid of the box?
Yeah. What's really funny is Jeff Jenkins was one of our previous guests that we've interviewed today even, and we talked about the value of authentic leadership, of being yourself. And when you step into that space, if they say, no, you've got to conform to the box, ultimately it's really hard to be authentic there. It's hard to be who you are. And when we're not who we are as a leader, we are trying to be something we're not. And there's this inauthenticity that breaks trust with people. It is so hard to be a healthy leader and to do good when we can't be ourselves. And so how did you navigate that level to level with, hey, I'm doing something new, not just new for you, but probably in a lot of cases new for the department. I was talking to a department yesterday. They just promoted their first ever female sergeant, and the city manager and assistant city manager are both female. And so we were excited about that idea, but there's obviously some things they have to navigate with that, and that officer is going to have to navigate. So how did you navigate that? And is that, as you've promoted more and more, has it just been normal? You're like, okay, I know how to do this now.
I don't think it ever gets normal being different from everybody else in the room.
Yeah.
We were joking around before this started. Even the uniforms that we wear.
Yes, we were.
Are different.
Yes. Yeah.
And understanding that I should not have to conform. There's a quote that talks about, I should not play small to make others feel comfortable.
Yes.
With my presence.
Yeah.
Being authentic to who I am and embracing my uniqueness and my differences and realizing that if everybody was a quarterback, there'd be nobody to catch the ball. There'd be nobody to run the ball. You have to have different people with different philosophies, viewpoints, perspectives in order to make an organization our size run.
Yes.
We can't all be just exactly alike. It can't be a bunch of clones in a blue uniform who all think exactly the same.
It's really funny you say that. We do a lot of work with personality. And interestingly, if you pull male and female out of it, there are two specific personality types that we encounter over and over again in law enforcement. And they both have a really strong sense of justice. They can both be a little black and white. They can both be a little like, I like things my way. And so those two types more than anything dominate law enforcement. And I'm always fascinated by the teams that there's 10 people and 7 of them are those two types. But then the 3 are these outliers that think differently, that are a little more on the emotional side or a little more on the slowing down and let's make sure we're making the right choices here. And it's those differences that make the team strong. When I encounter a team that is just those two types and there's nobody else to speak into it, they often run into these same challenges over and over and over again because there's no one there to help them think differently. Yeah. And we desperately need that. Whether it's female or different personality types or whatever it is, we need different perspectives in our lives.
I was in an executive leadership class several years ago, auditorium full of men, maybe one other woman in the whole place.
Yeah.
And the presenter is going through those personality types and what you expect to see in a chief of police.
Yeah.
And he made a point that the two lined up between females and males, that they all had exactly the same personality traits.
Yeah.
And he said, so, women are, I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but equal with men on this scale. They're just alike. I said, that's because we have had to change who we were.
Yeah, to match.
To fit in to that box.
Yeah.
I said, I guarantee you, if you went back and talked to those women before they became law enforcement executives, they would have had some different personality traits. But because this is a world that was created by men with man brains, we've had to change who we are and give up some of ourselves in order to be in this profession
Yeah.
and be considered as legitimate players in this game.
Absolutely.
He apologized to me from the platform and said, I have daughters, and it absolutely breaks my heart to think that they would ever be in a position where they would have to give up themselves and who they were to fit in.
Yeah.
At the break, I had man after man after man after man come up and apologize to me.
Yes.
They said, that is exactly what we've experienced in our agency, and I'm so sorry. I am so sorry, but I'm so glad that you said something because we need to fix that.
Yeah, and often we contribute to it in very unknowing ways. We just kind of function how we function because we're used to it. But there's often, it was funny, I worked with a female leader one time, and she was so helpful for me because she would absolutely stand up when something happened that shouldn't. And one of the times she mentioned, I was running meetings and we had probably 20 people in the room and going back and forth having this conversation about a strategic problem. And we got done afterwards, and she came and she knocked on my door and she said, hey, I want you to notice next time how often a woman will be talking and a man will just start talking over them. And it really, like I did the next meeting, I just started quietly watching. And every once in a while when it would happen, I started stepping in a little more and say, hold on, let her finish. Like, she's talking right now. I want to hear what she has to say. And I just became more cognizant of it. And I'm still bad about it sometimes, but at least there's that recognition of, oh, I would have never noticed that. One of my favorite experiences last year, I was invited to speak to this group, and it was primarily people of color and primarily women. We were talking about vulnerability and teaching on this idea. And it was kind of a conversation. I would throw some ideas out there and they would push back. And my favorite is when a woman raised her hand and she goes, that sounds great for you, tall white guy. And I was like, okay, that's fair. So tell me your perspective. And then everybody else got to bring in their perspectives. And it was so interesting to hear people that had never grown up the way I grew up and to hear how they have to navigate the world and what it looks like. And it is just fascinating. And so I think this perspective you're bringing is needed. How have you, as you've kind of navigated this, my guess is you have probably also then mentored a lot of women behind you. What has that looked like for you?
That is the goal.
Yeah.
Not to pull up the ladder.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't gotten anywhere, but hopefully I have made it easier for the women who have come behind me.
Yeah.
When I started at Round Rock, I was the fourth female in the department. There were only 4 of us.
And it was already a pretty good sized department, wasn't it?
It was 2003, so
yeah,
we were growing at that time. And again, my imposter syndrome, my fear, as I'm in the testing process, I told my husband, I said, you know what? If they wanted women working there, there would be women working there.
Yeah.
There's a reason why there's not more.
Yeah.
So I was number 4, and now we're up to 23.
Okay. Even that number seems really small compared to the overall size of the department.
Yeah. For a full sworn complement, we're at 209.
Okay. So just over 10% then, right around 10%?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the important work comes in having these conversations.
Yeah.
We have a junior police academy during the summer, and I talked Chief into a girls' empowerment week. So we've done it 2 years now.
Nice. Okay.
So we bring in the women from the department, from city government. We had our city manager, Lori Hadley. She took a session. We take them to meet judges. Our goal is to show them women in positions of power and leadership and authority and help them to start stepping into that. So I've got a wristband from that, as a matter of fact. And our motto is brave, strong, and fearless. And then on the inside, it says, I'm always enough. So starting even with the youngest, if we can tide the stem of that imposter syndrome and that shrinking and trying to fit in with this generation of women, can you imagine the world that we're going to live in when women step into their power and what they're meant to do?
They step into the understanding that they are enough. And this is really fascinating because I'm writing a book right now on why we burn out, even though it's really not hard to defeat burnout. It's a lot like being skinny. Everybody knows how to do it. We just don't do it. And the question is, why don't we do it? And ultimately, what it all boils down to is we believe the story that we're told over and over again that we're not enough. And so everything we're doing is to prove we're enough, and we take on too much, we overcommit, we say yes to everything, and then we burn out and break.
Yeah.
But if we can take it all the way back to the not belief, I think, but understanding, because I think we're enough whether we know it or not, the understanding that we're actually enough, it changes every interaction we have after that.
It does.
And that ability to get them to start to think like that. And I always tell people, again, it's not a switch you flip. I've gone through a whole lot of therapy and a whole lot of coaching. Now I have the practices that recenter me on the understanding that I'm enough. But I have to have those practices. I have to do it. And so I'm curious as you navigate that on a daily basis, because for me, I don't know about you, it's a moment-to-moment thing for me. Mm-hmm. I can walk into a room not feeling like I'm enough, notice that I'm trying to prove I'm enough in that room, and I can mentally kind of stop and go, okay, recenter on this idea, and then I'm there just to serve. And so how does that look for you? How do you navigate that when you realize, I think I'm functioning like I'm not enough right now?
Yeah. Again, like you said, sometimes it's moment to moment, depending on the room you're in.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to speak to a women's business group a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I went through the whole thing all over again. I don't have anything to say. They're not going to, I mean, just the whole gamut.
Yes.
And by the time I finished, everybody's in tears. I'm like, yes.
You were their favorite speaker. Yes.
Yeah. But you're right. It is getting to a place where you realize that you are enough.
Mm-hmm.
You were made exactly the way you were meant to be made.
Yep.
You're exactly where you need to be. And there's a reason why you're there.
Yeah.
And if you are not fulfilling the reason that you're there, which is to serve others and grow others and help others, then you're wasting the gift that you were given.
Yeah. Yeah. You're one of the divisions you're over is the training division.
Yes.
And so my guess is interacting with young people entering this industry is probably one of your favorite things, isn't it?
It is. It's also one of the most challenging.
I can imagine it is. What's some advice you give to them, whether it's male or female, coming into law enforcement today after 20 years in this business? What's some of the advice you give them as they're coming in?
Be true to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Trust themselves, and always, whoever you're living with, whether it be a spouse, loved one, don't think that you can't talk to them about what you do every day.
Yeah.
This last cadet class we had was all men, and all but 2 of them had come from the military. So they had had a whole different lived experience than most of the cadets we get in the academy. I said, y'all are going to go home and you're going to shut down. And your wife is going to ask you, how was your day? What'd you do? Because they're truly interested in what you did.
Yeah.
And you're going to say, oh, it was typical day. We didn't really do a lot. When you've had this whole big ball of things that happen.
And by the way, things that as humans, we're not necessarily designed to process particularly well.
No, you're not supposed to see people's insides on their outsides.
No.
That's one of the things that can happen during the day. I said, the worst thing you can do, this is the person that you are closest to in life. If you're married to him, you made a vow and a promise.
Yeah.
You trusted them with your life.
Yeah.
But you won't trust them with what you're going through every day. I said, that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
You can look historically at the divorce rate for police officers, and I truly think that is what is at the heart of it, because men's inclination is, I'm going to protect the woman from all of the bad things, and she doesn't need to know about all this. She can't handle it. I said, women can give birth.
Yeah.
We can grow humans inside our body.
You can handle it.
They can handle it, but you have to trust them
Yeah.
Don't shut it off. Don't tamp it down. Don't hide it.
Yeah.
Share it.
Even outside of law enforcement, though, I think there is this societal expectation that I think hurts a lot of marriages where we believe, and this is kind of a theory I've been working on over the last year, we think our job, whether it's a man or a woman, is to experience a challenge and solve it and wrap it up in a nice little bow and bring it to our spouse and go, look what I did. When in fact, the job is to bring them the mess and say, here's my mess. I need help.
Yeah, help me.
Yes, let's
walk
work
through
on this
this
together.
with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the divorce rate is so high, is because we're walking two different lives, two different paths.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying even over this last year to do more of, hey, babe, here's something I'm wrestling with. What do you think? And I'm seeing through those collaborations, and they're not easy when you're not used to it. Even married 25 years, we're not always great at that because we can get into just solve it mode and not listen mode. And so, but we're learning to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of, especially young marriages, because most people in the academy they're probably not in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Most of them are in their 20s, right? Some of them even, 19, 21 years old. Those early marriages, if they can learn to talk and to be heard by their spouse, I think there's something to that. And I don't know that you have to reveal every grisly detail, but to say, I went through something today, even that is probably helpful, isn't it?
Yes. And I've been fortunate because my husband was an officer before I was.
Okay.
So we automatically have a foundation of understanding of when I get home and say, I just need a minute, and then I can talk.
Yeah.
He understands. He doesn't know what happened. Just give me, I'm going to go walk the dogs. I'm going to let some of this out.
Yeah.
And I'll be back.
Yeah.
But he, he's also a combat veteran. So a lot of those, like I said, seeing people's insides on their outsides, he has a framework of understanding.
Yeah.
A lot of these young kids' wives may not have that,
Yeah.
But they can't be so afraid of shielding them from everything that they cut them out of a significant portion of their lives.
Yes.
If you're coming home every night and you don't want to talk about what you did for the last 12 hours of your life, you're chipping away at that life you have with someone that you're supposed to be sharing.
Well, and ultimately that's where the unhealthy coping mechanisms come in, because we don't have healthy ones like unpacking it with our spouse. That's where the alcohol abuse comes in. That's where it always starts small and grows because we're not meant to just stuff all that down and hold it in. And so that's really interesting. So I'm curious, how do these young kids, I guess it's hard to know how much they hear it, but the book Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, right? It's a very easy read. All of it makes sense. All of it is like, yes, we need all of this. And every one of them will read it and go, yeah, but it'll never happen to me. And I think they read it again 20 years later and go, oh my gosh, I really should have actually done what this says. And so I'm curious, do you see these little moments of recognition like they're getting it? Or is it just one of those, I'm going to plant seeds and then you're going to go into your career and we'll see what grows?
A little of both.
Okay.
So we use that book in the academy.
Yeah.
Willie, the assistant chief that we have now, is actually the facilitator for that conversation.
Yep. I bet he does a great job at that.
So, yes, he does. So they have the book in their hand when they're in the academy. Again, you never know exactly where something is going to land.
Yeah.
It's like throwing out ryegrass seed a couple of weeks ago. I have the fattest doves anywhere in the county. The seeds aren't growing, but the doves
they're happy as can be,
oh
aren't
my
they?
Gosh, they are coming by the
It's
hundreds.
Like an all-you-can-eat buffet in your front yard.
They're like, thank you so much. It's not growing, but then again, it is, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm feeding a population of doves in the winter.
Yes.
So it's taking root somewhere, maybe just not like I expected it to.
Yeah. And you trust that something is happening. And I think it's interesting working with law enforcement because and I don't know how early it starts in the career, but there's just this wall of like, as you're teaching and as you're connecting with them, there can be this wall of just none of this is hitting, none of this is doing anything. And I think part of it's that lack of vulnerability of saying, yeah, this is affecting me right now. But I'm amazed how often I will teach a group of 20 officers. and you'll get the wall, right? And some of them will start to open up, but every once in a while, the ones that were the most closed off, 2, 3, 4 weeks later, 2, 3, 4 months later, they'll come and be like, hey, by the way, that thing you said, 3 months ago, that really hit. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know it in the moment. And if you're responding to them based on how they're responding or not, you're never going to have an impact.
No.
You just have to go. You just have to go hard, like they're receiving every bit of it. And I think that's how you plant those seeds really well. You just trust that eventually something good's going to come out of it.
Yeah. Become a gardener.
Yeah.
And be okay with, if I'm not growing grass, I'm feeding birds.
I love that. There is so much wisdom in that, because I think we set these plans as leaders of, here's how it has to go. I'm going to do this thing and they're going to respond this way. I'm just going to do this thing, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I'm going to trust that there's something good guiding this, and something good is going to come out of it. And
absolutely.
That's I know your faith probably guides you a lot in that direction. And that's where I find a lot of comfort is in, I'm going to show up, be me, do the best I can, because I think I'm called to do this. And we'll see what happens. And I'm not responsible for what happens, but I get to kind of watch it and see, and it's pretty magical when you see people grow that way. So as you're navigating this with all these young officers, because y'all have a great training division, by the way, y'all run a great academy. I love whenever I get to be there. As you're navigating this with them, how do the women that come into this, are they hearing you when you talk about these challenges, and are they interested in your story and kind of digging in?
I hope so. I had an opportunity to speak to a group of female law enforcement officers several months ago.
Yeah.
It was an event called Back the Badge. And I got real with them.
Yeah.
And we cried together, and, it starts out with, you have some that are tough.
Yeah.
And then one of those seeds lands, and you can see the physical change. We were talking about promotion at one point.
Yeah.
And how you navigate through promoting and being a woman in this career field. And one of them's kicked back in her chair. She said, I don't want any part of that. I said, well, okay. Who do you want to work for? If not you, then who gets promoted in your place?
Yeah.
Is that somebody who needs to be a leader in your organization? Is that somebody you want to follow? Where's your responsibility in making a better choice?
Yeah.
You don't like the process, so you are going to abdicate your responsibility in this.
Yeah.
By the end of that, she said, you know what? You're right. I'm putting in for that promotion. If for no other reason, then I don't want to work for him. I said, whatever it is, I wish you luck. But that group of women, we got down and dirty in the, these are the things that have happened to me.
Yeah.
This is the way that I have navigated this. These were my challenges. And I think it's important for them to hear.
Yes.
I didn't get here by accident. My chief is very, very protective of me. When somebody says, oh, you're the highest ranking female Round Rock's ever had, he stops him. She didn't get this position because she was a woman. She got this position because she was the best person for the job.
Yeah.
And I tell others, don't reduce our accomplishments and our achievements to our gender.
Yeah.
We are so much more than our gender.
Yeah.
See us for our accomplishments and our worth, and not just because it's something unique and different that you can say, hey.
It's such an interesting line to walk, because we do have to acknowledge there are specific challenges you face because of your gender. Especially, we've already dove into those, but also don't view us just that way. Like, can we acknowledge the challenges while also acknowledging that the things we do are because we're really good at what we do. And we have to have both those conversations at one time and hold both truths in the hand. And that's really hard. Yeah. I think in society, we like things to be black and white. We like things to be simple.
Comfortable.
Very comfortable. And I think in law enforcement, one of the primary personality types is all about black and white. and right and wrong. And so for them, the complexity of, let's acknowledge you've had to jump through some extra hoops, but also you are really good at this and you're not getting it just because you're a woman. I think both those things have to be talked about at once, and that's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Because I have to be the one to say it.
Yeah.
And it's not comfortable to say it.
Yeah.
But I studied for a year before they even posted a sergeant's test because I knew it was coming up.
Yeah.
I studied on my off time. I had a packet of study material. Everywhere I went, I carried it with me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she only got that because she was a woman. No.
They don't see the hours
didn't
and
only
hours
get that.
and hours of work that went into it.
Nobody gave me anything.
Yeah.
I worked for that harder than you realize.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, and you were kind enough to bring one of your personal challenge coins. Now, I know part of it is you were trying to one-up Chief Harmon, who gave me a sticker.
Yep.
And Chief Harmon, she brought a coin. She's better. By the way, you want to be my favorite guest, bring me a challenge coin. I'm a nerd about these things. But yours is so interesting, and I've only run into a few people that had their own personal challenge coins they hand out. Often I'll hand out one for the agency. But this one has this angel on it, and you pointed out this great detail I love. It says preserve, protect, defend, and lead. And it's this angel with this sword. And you said, do you see that scar up under her eye? She's been through some stuff. She's been through the ringer. She has dealt with things. And I love the story behind that. So as you were thinking about this and designing this, because we know how hard it is to design a challenge coin. These don't come out of nowhere. How much of your career and the experiences and all the things you've been through did you kind of pour into that idea? Is it a reflection of that?
It is. I sought out artwork that I felt was reflective of how I feel.
Yeah.
Where I'm at.
Yeah.
We're called upon to be protectors. We're called upon to be warriors, defenders. But she's not perfect. Mm-hmm. The scar shows you that she's not perfect.
Yeah.
She's been through the fight, but she picked that sword back up and went back to work.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to convey from that.
Yeah.
We're not going to be perfect. We're going to get knocked down and scuffed up.
Yes.
Her hair's not even perfect.
It's pretty great.
But we keep fighting.
Yes. That's everything we do. Our wristbands say keep moving forward. And all of it is not about perfection. It's about you're going to get the crap kicked out of you. And when that happens, can you get back up? Because as long as you get back up and move forward, you're okay. Mm-hmm. But the minute you can't, and what we're learning and trying to get people to really embrace is this idea that in order to move forward, in order to get back up, we've got to be doing different things. We've got to care for ourselves. We've got to be vulnerable. We got to go to therapy. We got to do all the things that we were not taught how to do. And it turns out that's what actual heroic leadership looks like. It's leading the way and saying, I'm struggling and I'm going to therapy for this. And helping people understand that. And it is so hard to model because the fear is there that says, well, if you do that, you're going to get fired. You do that, people are going to ostracize you. Maybe one or two will, who knows? Mm-hmm. But somebody is going to quietly look at that and it's going to save their life someday. That is heroic, but it takes so much vulnerability and courage. And so you're modeling that really well, I believe. One of the things we're always really trying to get at with this project is how we can help our teams thrive. And a lot of the ways we function in public service in general are not really sustainable when it comes to people. A lot of the ways we function in law enforcement are even worse. And so what do police departments specifically and law enforcement specifically need to rethink in order to create a much more sustainable future for their people so that they can thrive?
Everything.
Just top to bottom.
Absolutely everything. We need to burn the ships.
Okay.
Because the ship that got us where we are is not adequate for where we need to go.
Yes.
You look at the analogy, but people crossed oceans on ships.
Yeah.
They kept the ships in the port just in case they had to go back.
Yeah.
Or just in case it didn't work.
Yeah.
How many times do we hear, well, we'll try it. this way. We'll try it your way. But if it doesn't work, we can always go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
Just because we've been doing it this way doesn't mean we ever did it right to begin with.
That is important.
If you're going to progress, you can't always have the mindset of, I don't expect it to succeed, so we're going to keep the ship anchored right here just in case we all need to pile back in there.
Yeah.
Well, the ship has dry rotted. You have twice as many people as you did when whatever this policy that the ship brought over was implemented.
Yeah.
You can't keep doing things the same way.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly, physiologically, our brains are wired to give us a hit of dopamine whenever we find something we're looking for. So if I am looking for something to not work, it doesn't matter how well it works. It could be amazing. My brain is going to twist it a little bit and show me a different reality and say, look at how that's not working. Look at how that's not working. Because every time it does, it gets a hit of dopamine. And I describe our brains as like a cocaine addict that can generate more cocaine just by believing something.
We don't want that.
They are like drug addicted liars up there in our heads. And so ultimately, if we believe something's going to fail, we're going to see it fail no matter what happens. And so we have to have this openness, you're right, to, hey, let's rethink everything. Let's really change this, because ultimately the system y'all are working in was not designed for human beings. And that's what we've got to fix. It is so dehumanizing that we look at the things that happen with police departments on the news. The things that make the news are almost never good. And when some of those things happen and you see how an officer kind of dehumanized a victim somehow and crossed a line, I always looked at and also understand the complexity of that officer has been living in a system that has dehumanized them for a really long time. And we can't necessarily always be shocked at that outcome. It doesn't mean they're right. It means they still deserve whatever happens. But we have to understand that this is a tough and broken system.
Yeah.
And we've got to fix it.
Full of human beings.
Yes.
Humans are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
We are starting to see as an industry things like restorative rest policies, where if you work this many hours, you must have this much time off the clock.
Yeah. We make truck drivers do it. Why wouldn't we make sworn police officers do it?
Who carry guns and drive cars
and
all the time.
Moment-to-moment decisions about life or death.
Yeah. Mental health leave.
Yeah.
State has a mental health leave policy now.
Yeah.
That officers can take this mental health leave without it drawing against their leave balances. We're seeing, we built a decompression room where someone can go and just turn it off for a few minutes. Things like daycare provided by the city. So during the pandemic, the city opened one of our rec centers for childcare.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
But imagine looking forward, what if we had our own childcare facility? We were talking about attracting women to law enforcement.
Yeah.
When you're pregnant, you're off the street. You're gone. You're limited duty for however long it takes to get back. But going back and leaving your child, what if they were in the next building?
Yeah.
For our communications staff, when it's a bad weather day and something happens and daycare is closed, do they come to work or do they stay home with their child? What if there was a daycare right there and they could just load up their kid and be right there? It's rethinking those things that are going to move us into the future and continue to set us apart when it comes to taking care of our people and their needs.
Yeah. And I think rethinking the leadership that is necessary to make all that work. Because we can have, I mean, you help supervise the peer support program, I believe. We can have the best peer support. We can have the best decompression rooms. We can have all these programs, all these things. We can have mental health leave. But if we don't have the leaders that are willing to take the mental health leave and are willing to use the decompression room and help people understand that it's good, I don't know how many will actually take advantage of it. And so we have to not just rethink the policies and the procedures and what do we offer and how do we do it. We have to rethink how we lead.
Yes.
And we have to change how we lead for humans, because I encounter a lot in law enforcement this you treat a new cadet in a really rough way. And it's like, well, I was treated that way. And I've sat them down and said, okay, but let's talk about how the human brains integrate information.
Mm-hmm.
It is not through being screamed at. It is not through, like, outside the police car, it probably should be unsafe and scary. And like you're trying to navigate it and figure it out, and not intentionally unsafe, but it should feel a little scary when you're first a police officer. But then when you get back in that car, the job of the training officer is to create safety so that their brain can integrate lessons. Yeah. And yet you don't see that as often. You see a lot of training officers that are just so hard on them because guess what? Their training officer was a decade ago and theirs was a decade before that. And we're just repeating these mistakes, these almost like generational mistakes we keep repeating over and over because, well, I had to go through it, so you do too. Yeah. And so we have to rethink almost everything in terms of how we lead in order to lead humans. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned the way we treat cadets and things like that. This generation isn't going to put up with a lot of the things that we had to put up with. No. You know, there are still some academies that are very regimented and very strict military. You know, they pounce themselves up against the walls every time somebody walks down the hall. And we are very academically focused.
Right.
We're not going to punish them just for the sake of, you know, we know how it's going to be, and we're
to show them they're cadets.
Yeah. We're going to put you in your place. This generation's not going to stand for that.
No. It's funny you say y'all are more academically focused, because I also know Round Rock is one of the few police departments in the area that has actual physical standards that you have to meet every year to keep your job.
Yes.
And so I think you're probably a very good mix of both would be my guess, because there needs to be physical standards. There needs to be certain things that we do have to value on the physical side of things. But how do we get people to live up to those? Are we inspiring them to do that? Or are we trying to scream at them and force them into it because that's what happened to us?
No. Not in our academy. And we are also the only academy in the state of Texas that has 100% pass rate on our state exam. So
that is interesting. Yeah. Do you ever run into, I think there's some that feel it is their job to wash people out, not to train them. I've encountered this in police departments where you could tell the person the way they were training, they didn't see their job as to train. It was to make it so hard that you left, because if you couldn't stand up to that, you can't handle anything else. Have y'all seen that, and how have you learned to navigate that?
In the past, we have. Okay. Trying to reframe the field training officer to understand, hey, why don't you remember where you were? Yeah. And how somebody treated you? Yeah. Would you want to go back, or would you want your son or daughter to come to this department and be trained like that? Or would you want somebody who got in the car and said, okay, let's talk about what just happened. It didn't go exactly the way we thought it was going to. Yeah. Tell me how you felt. And then let's talk about how we're going to do it differently the next time for a better outcome. Yeah. Yeah. They have to be teachers and mentors and best friends, and there's so much more to the field training officer role other than just go make a traffic stop and I'm going to evaluate you on what you did wrong.
One of our long-term goals is we want to create a program for FTOs to teach them how humans actually learn. Because you're right, you have to be best friend, you have to be teacher, you have to be parent in a lot of ways. And I think most leadership comes back to marriage and parenting. Yes. And when you're a parent, like, you have to be all of those things. And there's times we got to be really firm. There's times we got to make sure you don't get run over. So I am going to yell to get you out of the street because you were about to get hit by a car, you know? But those are very few. Mostly what they need is somebody to help them process and to think through and to create space for them to actually integrate all this information. And most of the times, and this is not every department, but a lot of departments I see, it's, you've been doing this a decade, you're an FTO. That does not mean you're meant to be a teacher or a parent or a supporter or any of those things. And so I think there has to be higher standards. And I know a lot of departments run into a challenge where it's like, well, we just don't have enough people to have those standards. But again, I think that's one of those ships we got to burn. We got to say, hey, if we're not going to train them well, why are we training them at all?
Exactly.
So let's make sure we do it well, even if we have to make other changes to make that happen.
Yep.
That's going to be a really interesting fight to fight.
Yeah. And you talk about the mentor, the parent, the teacher, that may all happen within the course of 5 minutes.
Yes.
In a car on a busy day.
Yeah.
Because these kids are, I call them kids because they are seeing things so much earlier in their careers than I ever did.
Yeah.
You know, we have a shooting at an entertainment, event and multiple casualties.
Yeah.
We have critical incidents going on.
And it wasn't that pace 20 years ago.
It was not. We kind of had a chance to warm up to most of it, at least here in Round Rock.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there are other jurisdictions where it was that way out of the gate, and we have those conversations in the office. People who have experiences from other agencies, like, that was my first day of FTO.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that way here 20 years ago.
Yeah. That is, I think you're doing some incredible work. And by the way, this interview is going to be incredibly impactful for a lot of people.
I hope so.
I'm going to let Karen know that you mentioned her. It's going to make her day. And I promise you, 20 episodes from now, we're going to interview somebody and they're going to talk about your episode. So this was such a good conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. We are dedicated to giving away everything we teach and, importantly, everything we learn while we're on the ground partnering with cities to develop healthy leaders and thriving teams. You can find all of that leadership development content on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for @ForwardPartner. You can also find more information about what we do at forwardpartners.net.